情似璀璨。
佢嘅一生充滿矛盾。身為單親媽媽，佢竟然忍痛離開自己個仔，選擇去修道。
She says it was so hard for me. It was as if my bones got apart one from the other.
身為一位隱修女，佢偏偏嚮往去到遠方傳福音，千里迢迢由法國嚟到啱啱開發嘅加拿大。
佢嚟嘅時候，喺美加呢度係冇女修會嘅，修女裏邊佢係第一批過嚟做一個開荒牛。
喺17世紀，一個普遍將女性局限於相夫教子嘅年代，佢主張為女孩子提供全人教育。
The Ursuline wanted the little girls to be able to understand the world, good decision also, so a critical mind.
聖瑪麗圭亞戲劇性嘅人生，為今日嘅我哋有咩啟發呢？創立於1608年嘅魁北克市，係加拿大歷史最悠久嘅城市。法國人嚟到北美洲建立新法蘭西殖民地，同時亦都將佢哋嘅宗教信仰帶到嚟呢度，因此呢度亦都係天主教喺美加嘅發源地。魁北克市除咗有莊嚴肅穆嘅聖堂，亦都有一啲好有歷史嘅修院，吳蘇洛女修會就係其中一間啦。魁北克市嘅吳蘇洛會創立於1639年。修院旁邊嘅博物館收藏咗好多極具歷史價值嘅文物，吸引唔少人嚟參觀。樓高3層嘅博物館雖然地方唔算好大，但係參觀呢間博物館就好似穿越時光隧道，令人翻去17到19世紀嘅新法蘭西。喺嗰個時代，進入修院過修道生活係點樣嘅一回事呢？呢度嘅展覽俾到大家一啲概念。
So at first, you see the chest over here. At first, the little girls who wanted to become a nun need to came here, kind of an interview. So they're gonna talk about her to see if she's a good candidate to become a Ursuline. And when she arrived here, she arrived with that kind of chest with all things that are very important to her, memories or things like this. And when she came here, she had to left her chest here, and she wasn't allowed to go back to this chest, so it's very symbolic. So she left her her old life behind her before she came here.
經過一段觀察期，候選生會領受會衣，呢一個儀式嘅意義重大。
She has the vestition when she get married to the Christ. So it's a really beautiful ceremony, and they are wearing it's a kind of a wedding dress, and it's a very emotional moment for them.
領受過會衣，候選生就會成為女修生，正式展開初學階段，學習點樣過修道生活。
She's gonna be divided between teaching, prayer, reading. So she's gonna do all these things, and sometimes it took 2 years to do so. It's like a probation period.
完成咗初學階段，女修生會準備宣發聖願，成為終生為天主工作嘅人。喺天主教會裏面，所有修女無論隸屬邊個修會，都會發貞潔、服從同神貧3個聖願。而吳蘇洛會嘅修女會額外發第4個聖願，將自己終身奉獻俾教育。博物館裏面最引人注目嘅係呢啲刺繡。刺繡喺17到19世紀期間係女性一個重要嘅謀生技能，所以喺吳蘇洛會修女辦嘅學校裏面，刺繡係其中一個學科。呢啲掛喺牆上邊嘅祭台布，全部都係修女嘅刺繡作品。布上邊嘅每一個細節都係由人手逐針逐針縫出嚟嘅。
It's hard to know exactly who did these pieces because there's no signature. It's part of the vows here that you don't have anything for yourself, that everything belongs to the community. So they sometimes spend so many hours on these pieces and they just don't sign it because they just want to make the church very beautiful for everyone.
祭台布嘅構圖極為複雜，由遠處睇差啲令人以為所有嘅細節都係用筆畫出嚟嘅。
All the gradient effect that you see in the middle and in the flowers, it looks like it's a painting, but it's all made by hand. And the other thing that she did, it's all the 3D effect here. And they took some horsehair to do so, this 3D effect. And we are very lucky that it's so well preserved until today.
博物館展出嘅刺繡作品，相信部分係由魁北克吳蘇諾會嘅創辦人聖瑪麗圭亞縫製嘅。聖瑪麗圭亞對魁北克以至加拿大嘅教育界貢獻良多。喺吳蘇諾會修院外面樹立咗一個大型嘅雕塑，雕塑嘅設計係一隻拎住鵝毛筆嘅手，意思係向所有致力於教育嘅女修會致敬。雕塑喺1997年，亦即係聖瑪麗圭亞逝世325週年嘅時候揭幕。
This is our beautiful chapel. Here are the remains of Saint Marie of the Incarnation. She was declared a saint on April 3rd, 2014.
Sister Elizabeth 係吳蘇諾會嘅修女，佢加入修會接近60年，對聖瑪麗圭亞嘅生平了如指掌。
This is her birth certificate. She was born on the 28th of October, 1599. She was in Canada during her last 33 years. She lived here. And if you look up, you have a monument of her, and she is holding a house in her hands. This to remind us that when she came to Canada, she had been mandated, like in prayer, to go and build a house for Jesus and Mary. And this she aimed at during her whole life.
聖瑪麗圭亞又名降生聖人的瑪利亞，係美加嘅第一位女傳教士。佢嘅一生充滿傳奇，擁有過多重嘅身份。佢喺1980年被當時嘅教宗聖若望保祿2世封為真福。喺2014年，教宗方濟各以相當於冊封嘅方式將佢列入聖人嘅行列。瑪麗圭亞於1599年喺法國嘅都爾出世，從小同天主有住深厚嘅關係。佢喺7歲嗰一年喺夢裏邊聽到天主問佢一個問題。
In a dream, she had seen the Lord opening his arms, asking her. She was only 7 years old. She was in the schoolyard, and Jesus asked her, "Will you be mine?" She went to him running. She says, yes. They kissed one another, and she woke up. She says, this dream gave me a tendency to do good all the time. And something she'd like to do was to go at her father's bakery, because he was a baker, and she would take some bread and bring it to the poor.
喺14歲嘅時候，瑪麗話俾佢媽媽聽，自己想做修女。但係佢嘅父母認為佢嘅性格似乎唔係好適合過修道嘅生活。瑪麗於是喺17歲嘅時候下嫁一位商人，喺19歲嘅時候生咗佢嘅仔克勞德。瑪麗嘅丈夫因為生意一落千丈，身體變得越嚟越差，後來更因病離世，留低只有6個月大嘅克勞德。瑪麗喺傷痛之中，除咗要照顧個仔，仲要賣刺繡作品嚟到賺取生活費。更加要處理丈夫留低嘅生意，想辦法還清債務。但就喺呢個時候，天主徹底改變咗佢嘅生命。1620年3月24日，喺前往丈夫工廠嘅途中，瑪麗有一個畢生難忘嘅經歷。
She says, I was stopped, and in a few moments, I saw all the imperfections and sins I had committed since my birth. I lifted up my head. I saw a little church. The door was open. I went into the church. A priest was there as if waiting for me. I went to him, told him all my sins. Well, it's as if I was immersed in Christ Jesus' blood, who would have given up his life, would it have been for me alone? So I went home, and I felt I was changed into another creature. I wasn't the same at all. I didn't even recognize myself. So much I was changed.
瑪麗咁年輕就喪夫，佢嘅親人都勸佢再婚，咁樣佢哋兩母子嘅生活都會有所改善。但係佢向天主發貞結願，決定一生保持獨身。瑪麗處理好丈夫嘅生意之後，佢管理業務嘅才華好快就得到賞識。
She settled the affairs of her husband so well as a good businesswoman. She had a brother-in-law who noticed that, and he said to himself, I have to get this woman to work for me. When little Claude became to be 2 years old, then she thought it could be the time for her to go at her brother-in-law's place, her sister's place, to work with him, to help them out with the business.
喺之後嗰幾年，瑪麗依然忙於協助佢嘅姐夫打理生意同埋照顧兒子，但喺忙碌之中，佢對修道生活嘅渴望依然有增無減。終於喺1631年，佢決定加入法國都爾嘅吳蘇洛女修會，取名降生成人的瑪利亞。
佢自己都知道係呢個愛天主去追隨佢而感動到佢內心，知道佢要擺低呢一啲好重要嘅嘢。
So when she left her son the first time, he was 12 and she was 31. She says, it was so hard for me. It was as if my bones got apart one from the other. So hard it was for me to leave my son. But still, I am sure this is God's will, she added. She was very sure it was God's will she was doing.
佢仔唔想去入修院，佢自己都唔想掉低個仔。但係因為佢知道天主俾佢嘅召叫，佢需要去做呢樣嘢，而忍痛去做呢樣嘢。
瑪麗之所以取名降生成人嘅瑪利亞，係因為佢進入初學嘅日子係1631年3月25日。嗰日教會慶祝聖母領報瞻禮，紀念天使加比厄爾向聖母瑪利亞預報天主聖子降生成人嘅大喜訊。而喺11年前嘅3月24日，係瑪麗經歷咗重大改造嘅日子。佢取名降生成人的瑪利亞，就好似一個妻子跟隨丈夫嘅聖事一樣。喺17世紀，所有女修會都係隱修嘅。瑪利亞修女雖然足不出戶，但係天主就藉住唔同嘅方法，令佢向往去到距離法國都爾超過5000公里嘅魁北克傳教。1633年聖誕期間，瑪利亞修女又發咗一個好特別嘅夢，夢裏邊自己拖住一個女人嘅手，佢哋一齊行緊一條好崎嶇嘅路，去到一個從未見過嘅地方。
At Tours in France, she had a dream. She was 33 years old. She had just made her profession, her vows, her first vows. And in this dream, she saw St. Joseph. She saw a country, and what she says is it's a country that was full of hardships.
瑪利亞修女起初唔知道夢裡面見到嘅係乜嘢地方，過咗一段日子，佢先至喺祈禱之中知道嗰度係加拿大。瑪利亞嘅仔克勞德嗰陣時喺一間耶穌會辦嘅學校寄宿，學校嘅一位老師亦都係耶穌會神父，喺書信中向瑪利亞修女透露自己渴望去到新法蘭西傳教，仲寄咗一本耶穌會士嘅傳教日記俾佢。
The Jesuits were here before, huh? The Jesuits had come here in 1625, and they were the ones that would write to France to tell the people in France about all what was going on here. They would stress on education. They would say, we give education to the boys, but no one is there to give education to the girls. And we need to have good wives and good mothers for the families. So when Mother Marie would read this, like she was sure she was the one that would have to do that.
為咗令遠赴新法蘭西嘅任務成事，天主仲召叫咗另外一位女士，佢 佢就係佩爾特里夫人。
And Madame de la Pelletrie read the same reviews, and Madame de la Pelletrie's reaction was to say, well, I'm rich. I inherited from my father. I could give a part of my money for the mission.
She wasn't a sister, but she had a great faith. And one day she became very, very sick. And she did a prayer to Saint Joseph. And she told him, if I'm well tomorrow, if I'm not sick anymore, I'm gonna dedicate my life and my money. I'm gonna give everything I have to new friends and to build a church or a school for a house for Mary and Jesus there. And of course, the day after, she was very well, and she wanted to keep her words.
經過耶穌會士嘅穿針引線，呢兩位有志去到遠方傳教嘅女士，終於喺出發到新法蘭西之前冇幾耐碰頭。瑪利亞修女一見佩爾特里夫人，就認出當年喺夢裏面見到嘅人就係佢。1639年5月4日，佢哋終於坐船離開法國。除咗吳蘇諾會嘅修女，同船仲有幾位耶穌會神父，同埋聖奧斯定會嘅幾位修女。1639年8月1日，佢哋終於嚟到魁北克。
Upon their arrival, they arrived on the St. Lawrence River here. There were only 250 white persons in Quebec. And there were 6 houses, 4 made of wood and 2 made of stone.
聖瑪希佢喺加拿大嘅貢獻，我諗我哋要想像一下佢當年佢嘅處境。佢最初嚟到係掉低晒佢所有佢熟悉嘅嘢，咁隻身過到嚟呢度重新開始過。咁佢嚟到呢度扎根嘅時候咧，要面對呢度嘅社會嗰陣時嘅好少嘅人啦，好少嘅 support 啦，好少嘅資源啦，好多唔認識嘅嘢啦，俾我哋睇到聖瑪利佢因為佢對耶穌嗰份愛咧，令到佢時常都好信賴主耶穌，因為佢嘅愛要福傳咧，佢自然會有辦法。
到咗魁北克之後，瑪利亞同埋幾位修女喺一間破舊嘅木屋嗰度住。木屋嘅屋頂充滿裂縫，喺晚上佢哋仲可以透過裂縫睇到天上嘅星星。居住喺簡陋嘅環境下，對瑪利亞修女同佢幾位同伴嚟講唔係大問題。佢哋更加在意嘅係點樣能夠盡快為呢度嘅女仔提供教育。
The day after their arrival, they already had 18 girls, Indians and French girls, to give education to.
佩爾特里夫人本來打算每年捐出3000法郎嚟支持吳蘇諾會喺新法蘭西嘅工作，但係好不幸，因為家族財政糾紛嘅關係，最終佢只能夠每年捐出900法郎，大概相當於當年一個專業技工嘅年薪。喺極度欠缺資金嘅情況之下，佢哋唯有依賴法國嘅善長支持，咬緊牙關克服一切困難。
And this time, well, this was a forest, so the trees had to be uprooted, and everything that was needed had to come from France. So this was kind of something to do, but they succeeded to do that.
1642年，佢哋嘅修院正式落成。呢一間係吳蘇諾會喺歐洲以外嘅第一間修院。喺呢間修院，修女開設咗一間取錄法裔同埋原住民女生嘅寄宿學校。呢間係喺美加嘅第一間女校。由於寄宿學校設喺修院裏面，所以寄宿嘅女仔同修女一樣，都係過住隱居嘅生活嘅。
The little girls were clustered with the nuns, but they had the chance to see their family for Christmas time and summer vacation. And they had the chance to speak with their parents the Sunday after the Mass, but through the grills like this. It seems very strict, but the Ursulines were clustered, so it just makes sense that the students were clustered with the nuns. And then they just wanted to keep the purity of the little girls. We are here in the middle of Old Quebec, so they just want to make sure that they are not becoming friends with the bad person around here.
隱居聽起嚟好似好枯燥，但係寄宿學生嘅生活其實並唔單調。吳 吳蘇諾會嘅修女並冇因為學生係女仔而局限佢哋要學嘅知識。呢度提供嘅學科相當全面。
Teaching the young girls, it's not just science, French, English classes, it's also art, music, painting, and of course embroidery, lace making, photography also, sculpture. It's very a complete education.
Ursuline Sister 佢哋嘅教育嘅方法係唔單止係想嗰啲女仔學識基本嘅學校嗰陣時會教俾啲女仔嘅嘢，佢哋嘅教育嘅方法咧係唔單止係簡單嘅文字，仲會教佢啲嘅技能。所以一開始佢本身例如佢自己係好純熟嘅一個刺繡嘅技工，咁就會想嗰啲學生咧無論你係貴族又好，無論你係本地嗰啲印第安人又好咧，全部都學一啲呢啲咁嘅技能，學識點樣去刺繡，可以能夠揾到錢，到時出翻去嘅時候，唔係淨係嫁咗俾一家人一間好人家咧就算，而係能夠可以有啲技能可以幫個家庭去揾到錢。
Here we are in the what I call science classes, and it's just something very special because the Ursuline wanted the little girls to be able to understand the world. Even if they were to be mothered at home, they really wanted the little girls to be able to do some good things at home, good decision also, so a critical mind also.
更加重要就係當嗰啲女仔嗰陣時唔係咁注重咁多嘅教育嘅時候，佢哋嚟到學識咗咁多呢啲咁嘅技能同埋學識之後咧，佢哋出翻去能夠更加有自信，唔會咁容易俾人欺負，唔會咁容易會因為譬如揾唔到一個好人家而冇出路。咁呢個係Ursuline Sister 特別係聖默希佢本身佢嘅心意係想去令到成個人都得到一個提升。嚟到呢，佢主要佢嘅使命係做教育，但係佢唔係將法國人嗰套嚟到硬生生咁樣去逼嗰啲原住民去學去改變佢哋嘅文化，而係佢會學佢哋嘅嘢，去認識佢哋，然後等到佢哋有興趣，用佢哋嘅方法，用佢哋嘅語言去教導佢哋有關天主。為佢嚟講，佢唔係想將法國人嘅嘢俾佢，而係更加係想用佢哋能夠學嘅方法，將天主嘅愛，將耶穌嘅聖心，佢嗰份嘅慈悲，去教導俾佢哋，去見證俾佢哋，去吸引佢哋認識，亦都擁抱耶穌嗰份嘅愛。
為咗服務原住民，瑪利亞修女跟耶穌會傳教士學咗4種原住民嘅方言。佢將福音翻譯成為佢哋嘅文字，更加用印第安方言編寫要理，仲編定咗印第安方言嘅字典。
This stained glass window, it shows her she is sitting as the Indians do. And notice her face, the color of her face is the same as if she were an Indian, a native. You see, this to show that she really did her best to be encultured, to take the ways of the natives.
喺吳蘇諾會嘅修院裏面，仍然可以睇到瑪利亞修女善於接待原住民嘅痕跡。
This is a meal they used to make for the Indians called sagamite, and they give the recipe. They put some plums in it, and some flour, and some bread, pieces of bread, and lard, so that and grease, a lot of grease, because this was the way the Indians liked it.
瑪利亞修女一生寫過超過1萬封信，當中絕大部分，好似呢一封咁，都係佢寫俾身在法國嘅仔克勞德。雖然佢哋兩個分隔兩地，但係書信令到佢哋聯繫埋一齊。
He said to his mother, "We will never see each other again." But then he says, "You have to write for me the experience, God's work in you. You have to write of this and hand it over to me."
瑪利亞修女犧牲自己嘅睡眠時間，寫低自己嘅經歷， 可惜佢寫嘅第一批信件被修院嘅大火燒毀。喺克勞德嘅懇求下，瑪利亞修女再次將佢自己嘅心路歷程寫低。17世紀嘅郵遞服務受到當時嘅運輸系統限制，信件一定要喺秋天完結之前寄出，如果唔係就要等到第2年嘅夏天先至可以寄出。嗰陣時嘅人寫信要寫幾個副本，經唔同人嘅手先至可以去到收信人嘅手中，全靠瑪利亞修女嘅犧牲同克勞德嘅堅持，我哋今日先至可以睇到瑪利亞修女嘅書信。更加令人欣慰嘅係，雖然瑪利亞修女因為修道而冇辦法照顧克勞德，但係天主就一直守護住佢。
When she was 14, she had asked her mother if she could enter the Benedictine order. And her mother said no. But you know what? Her son, later on, became a Benedictine monk. And she had never spoken to him about it.
佢擺低咗個仔，但係佢個仔因為佢嘅榜樣，亦都尋找咗天主，變成咗一個本篤會嘅修士。有時跟隨天主嘅召叫，我哋要擺低好多其他嘅嘢。喺聖默希呢個身上，我哋睇到天主召叫佢做呢樣嘢，佢相信咗有更好嘅嘢會俾佢。
聖瑪麗圭亞喺佢73年嘅生命裏面，做咗好多平常人眼中唔可能嘅事。一切嘅唔可能，最終變成可能，都係因為佢對耶穌嘅愛。
自己嘅書信裏邊，佢好多時都會講及係佢對耶穌嗰份嘅愛，好想耶穌嘅聖心嘅嗰份嘅愛，嗰份嘅傾瀉，接觸到更多嘅人。
She was in love with Jesus. She would say, Jesus 100 times my love, 1,000 times my love, an infinity of times my love in her prayer.
喺佢嘅一生裏邊見證咗就係耶穌想做嘅，只要我哋依靠耶穌，我哋愛耶穌咧，佢會透過我哋成就呢樣
嘢。70年代佢辭去工作，一個人由香港出發，踏遍中東、歐洲唔同嘅地方。
做呢個旅程，我都唔係為旅行而旅行嘅。
佢唔知道呢一個旅程嘅目的地，佢心裏面只有一個信念，
知道每個人有自己嘅聖召，天主對每一個人有佢嘅計劃咁你要自己去揾去找尋。
你想聽更多何錦堂修士尋找聖召嘅經歷嗎？請唔好錯過呢一個星期嘅愛常傳。睇完呢一集嘅愛常傳，歡迎大家打我哋嘅熱線電話，分享一下你嘅感受或者係故事。同時都請收聽我哋逢星期六嘅電台節目《愛生命》，以及訂閱 Podcast。要購買天主教書籍同信仰靈修禮物，請嚟到我哋位於 Markham 嘅生命恩泉資源及媒體中心參觀選購。我哋下星期同樣時間再見，天主保佑。